So this is Ode on a Grecian Urn, which is the second of the four Keats poems that are currently in the Romantics collection for LXL English Literature. It's a bit of an odd one in the sense that in the first year, if you did Poems of the Decade in the first year, you'll have read Ode on a Grecian Periurn. And actually, that poem is a deliberate kind of homage to this one. If you remember that poem, it's essentially about looking at people who are often marginalised in society and seen as not very well educated. It's talking about boy racers, but kind of glorifying them and saying many years from now we'll see them as beautiful and arty and highbrow if they were on an urn in the way that Grayson Perry puts them. It is a deliberate reference to Ode on a Grecian Urn, and the kind of plot of this poem basically is that Keats looks at this urn that's come from ancient Greece, and as with the Nightingale, reflects on the fact that that this urn is still there, and yet all the people on it have gone and have died. So again, it's that reflection on kind of what's eternal versus what's transient. It's full of classical references, as you'd expect. Keats, does that more than any of the other romantics. He's a bit of an anomaly as a romantic by doing that. A lot of the others deliberately went against that because they saw that as part of the Age of Enlightenment. But with Keats, it is that idea, I think, of trying to prove himself, and I think this poem really, links to that very, very well. The urn is permanent, whereas he is transient, and his poetry is transient, and will, he fears, be forgotten. I think the poem does start to give a bit of an answer to that problem, and by the end sort of seems to acknowledge the fact that the urn is beautiful and the urn is, that there, it's eternal, it's forever there, but it's also lost something by doing that. There's also a sense of unfulfillment with it, that actually it's not entirely natural for life to be held in that way. So the first stanza you'll see there. Rhyme scheme, as with Ode on a Nightingale, Keats does this quite a lot in his poetry, where we have this almost sort of irregular rhyme scheme, where we have lines that are rhymed with lines that have come far earlier in the stanza. Again, I think that adds to Keats' sort of general sort of tone of melancholy, general tone of sort of looking back with this slightly nostalgic eye, which I think we get here. So there's still unravished bride of quietness. So the urn is this bride. I think that still is really important. So still is both an adjective and an adverb. It's an adverb in the sense that the vase is the urn is still unravished. In other words, it's not been destroyed yet. It's still not been ravished. But it's also an adjective. It describes the urn itself. It's still, it doesn't move. And I think that's the central point of this poem. The urn is held in time and is beautiful and is something that won't be destroyed by time, but precisely because it doesn't move, and therefore it isn't kind of alive in the way that Keats is, and the things that die are alive. Their foster child of silence and slow time, sylvan historian who can just express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme. So again, Keats sort of arguing the idea that this urn expresses itself far more beautifully than his rhyme can. It's the idea that we get in Shelley as well, the idea of the poet being flawed. It's key in the second generation romantics, this fear that they can't quite live up to the first generation, they're not quite achieving what they want to. What leaf-fringed legend haunts about thy shape, of deities or mortals, or of both in Tempe or the dales of Arcady? What men or gods are these? What maidens lot? So he's looking at this urn and just sort of question, who are these people? What inspired this urn? I'm so far removed and none of this kind of makes sense to me. I guess the wider point there is it's Keats being that far separated from what he's seen as high art, or what's classical art. He's looking at it and not understanding. As with on first looking into Chapman's Homer, it's like Keats looking at the Greek language and these Greek classic epic poems that he's just sort of distant from. What mad pursuit, what struggle to escape, what pipes and timbrels, what wild ecstasy. And notice at the end those frequent questions, one after the other. The mad pursuit, the struggle, the pipes, the ecstasy. So this assault on our senses, this total list of different actions, a list of questions, gives this quite a frantic sort of tone towards the end of the stanza. And that is in total contradiction to the still. And I think that's the point of this poem. The urn depicts this life as being as alive as it possibly could be, and yet the irony that nothing can move because it's held in time. So already I think we're getting Keats' sort of answer that yes, the urn is eternal and has achieved something that he can't, but precisely because it's still and it doesn't move, and nothing on the vase will actually come into fruition. I keep saying vase, it's an urn. Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. And notice that enjambment there. Again, the echo between those two lines that we get. Melodies, music. He links that with poetry are beautiful, but he acknowledges here that what makes this more beautiful is the fact that it's out of reach. What you don't hear, what you can't have, is more beautiful, and that's the point of this urn. And I think that's the point that Odin of Grace and Perry urn makes as well, isn't it? That actually the urn in years to come will be seen very, very differently to how we'd see those people now. Therefore, your soft pipes play on, and of course, the irony, they can't play on. He gives that instruction. The pipes can't play on, that they are held, by the nature of being painted onto the urn. They can't play anymore. They're stuck. Not to the sensual ear, but more endeared, pipe to the spirit ditties of no tone. Yeah, so this music is not for mortals, it's eternal, it's not for our world. Fair youth beneath the trees, thou canst not leave thy song, nor ever can those trees be bare. So, this is held in time of beauty. This young person on the urn won't get old. The trees won't lose their leaves. But notice, you cannot leave your song. The trees cannot be bare. There's that sense that they're sort of straining against what's actually inevitable. It's inevitable that trees do lose the leaves, that people do grow up, and the can, I think, really shows that actually the inevitable and natural thing is that they do become bare or grow old. Bold lover, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal, yet do not grieve. So, he describes his mad pursuit on the urn, where a male is desperately trying to sort of get a hold of this female to kiss. And the point here is making, actually, not only will the trees not lose their leaves and the people won't grow old, that guy will never kind of catch up with that girl, that love will never come into fruition. So there's this sort of bittersweet tone to the poem. It feels unnatural that can't happen. It's the urn has held life at this moment in time, but we're sort of desperate for that to carry on. What makes it so alive is what's about to come next, and that's not going to be there anymore. She cannot fade, though thou hast not thy bliss, forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. So Keats sort of says to this lover on the urn, don't worry, she will always be beautiful, you will always love. And there's that sort of slightly downbeat tone there, so that slightly, like I say, cynical, melancholic tone that we get from Keats, that seems to imply that actually, as life changes, this love would fizzle out, the beauty would fizzle out, and actually by being held on the urn it won't. But of course that means that it's never fulfilled. So the do not grieve feels almost like Keats is trying to sort of convince himself of that. And happy boughs, that cannot shed your leaves, nor ever bid the spring adieu, and happy melodist unwearied, forever piping songs forever new. So the melodist will constantly keep on piping, and the songs will forever seem new. But of course he also won't be piping because he's held in stasis on this urn. So these artists that are eternal, in the way that Keats won't be, but equally they're not playing, they're not putting their words or song out there in the way that Keats is. So again, there's that sort of sad irony forever in this poem. More happy love, forever warm and still to be enjoyed. And again, still to be enjoyed, the adverb, it's still coming, it's still still to be enjoyed, but it's also still on the urn is still, it's held there, and it will always be, it's always gonna be happening in the future. The enjoyment will never come. So it's both a positive and also a really sort of sad moment. Forever panting and forever young, all breathing human passion far above, that leaves a heart high sorrowful and cloyed, a burning forehead and a parching song. And this almost feverish feeling that we get in Ode to a Nightingale as well, that Keats has, desperate to sort of join this, to ever be young, to forever have this. But also the point is that none of those things about being young can be enjoyed because of what we're seeing on the urn, that it's held in time. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? So on the urn, there's a heifer, a female cow, being led to be sacrificed. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? To what green altar, O mysterious priest, leadst thou that heifer lowing at the sky? So the cow will always be waiting to be sacrificed. And all her silken flanks with garlands dressed. What little town by river or seashore or mountain built with peaceful citadel is emptied of this folk, this pious morn? So he contrasts the life on the urn with the fact that in real life now, this town, whatever it was, will be in ruins, will be empty, will just be sort of sitting there. So again, this sort of life and death sort of side by side. But of course, what's on the urn isn't really life. It's a picture of life. It's not, what makes it alive is the sounds that we can't hear, is the kiss that will never be, is the sacrifice that we'll never see. And little town, thy streets forevermore will silent be, and not a soul to tell why thou art desolate can e'er return. Yeah, so nobody will ever be able to pass on, your sort of your story. It's a very, like I say, very bittersweet poem here. O Attic shape, fair attitude, with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought. Notice again, I said sound in Keats is really important. I've not massively focused on it here, but the Attic shape and attitude, the marble men and maidens, we get this alliteration an awful lot. We get an awful lot of assonance in Keats, and again, it's the echoing sounds alongside the echoing rhymes, which I think add to the sense that Keats' poetry is about echoes. It's about echoes from the past, but of course, an echo isn't quite the life. The urn is an echo. It's not the real life. With forest branches and the trodden weed, those silent form dost tease us out of thought. So again, that assonance on the weed and the tease. He does this an awful lot throughout the poem. If you look back, you'll sort of see it. As doth eternity, cold pastoral, and that bit I think is really key. We get that caesura in the middle of the line, that colon there, cold pastoral. He's describing this ultimate romantic pastoral image, and yet it is cold. Not in the way that the cold earth slept below is cold, because Harriet's kind of lying in the ground underneath, but it's cold in the sense that it's a picture of the pastoral. It's not real. It's an image. And therefore it's flawed. It can't capture all of the life that's there. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain. So when we're all gone, you'll still be there. And again, he is transient, the urn is permanent. In midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man to whom thou sayest. And then he says what he feels that the urn is saying. But again, notice this, the urn is a friend to man. Keats perhaps here reconciling the fact that he may be forgotten, or that his life is transient, with the idea that there will always be another poet. There's, it's natural, and Shelley touches on that on Over to the West Wind. It's natural. These are the second generation of romantics. It's natural that there'll be others following them. And then he gives us this, what he feels the urn is saying. Beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know. And for me, that's one of the most problematic moments of the poem. Keats sets it up as the final kind of explanation. To me, it's a little bit like Shelley in The Question, where the question at the end that we build towards feels like that's not really the question. And here I'd say the same thing. That doesn't quite, to me, feel like really the point of the poem. Keats gives this kind of empty message from the urn that kind of goes that what's beautiful is true, and what's true is beautiful, and that's the permanent thing in this transient world. That's the permanent thing. So this urn remains because it's beautiful and because it shows something beautiful, and that's kind of all there is. So partly it's a speculation on the nature of art and art being permanent, but it does also feel underwhelming that the whole point of the urn is, oh yeah, if it's beautiful it's true, and if it's true it's beautiful. That to me seems to miss the whole point, that actually what's on this urn is beautiful because it's not quite real. It's not quite true. This urn is beautiful because it depicts the kind of the kiss chase essentially, but the reality would be that the kiss would come, but it doesn't. The reality is that that this love will possibly change over time, that the beauty will fade, that's reality. So to me, this poem actually seems to say that beauty and truth aren't quite the same thing. And so perhaps with this kind of empty message from this eternal thing, maybe Keats is starting to realise that transience is all there is, that actually with transience, yes, you acknowledge that you're not eternal, but you also acknowledge that the best things of life, the pipes will be heard, the love will be fulfilled, the dancing will carry on. So actually the best things of life are actually ultimately what makes it transient.